We hear a lot of perspectives on the Mankind podcast. Inclusion of a guest is not an endorsement of their views, and the opinions expressed here do not always represent the mission or values of the Mankind Project USA.
What if the thing that you're trying hardest to hide is also the thing that could lead you to healing? Hey everybody, Boysen here. Welcome back to the Mankind Podcast, the show where we break the molds of modern manhood to prove that there is more than one way to be a man. In this episode, we dive into a topic that affects far more men than we often admit or want to admit: pornography and compulsive sexual behavior. I'm joined by Chandler Rogers, founder of Relay, a digital recovery platform helping thousands of men reclaim integrity, connection, and purpose in their lives. We talk about how early exposure and secrecy shape so many of our relationships with sex and self-worth, and how shame keeps many of us stuck in silence. Chandler shares not only his personal story, but a powerful reframe: that porn often isn't the problem, it's the pain beneath it. If you've ever struggled with isolation, with addiction, or with the pressure to have it all together while something inside feels really off, this one might be for you. This is a conversation about vulnerability, about breaking silence, and about what's possible when we stop trying to white knuckle our way to healing and instead choose accountability and connection. Welcome to the Mankind Podcast. Hey everybody, it's Boysen. Welcome back to the Mankind Podcast, the podcast where we set out to prove week on week that there is indeed more than one way to be a man. And I think we're doing an extraordinary job of doing that. I am excited today to be with Chandler Rogers. Chandler, say hello first, and then we'll get into who you are.
Yeah, thanks, Boysen. It's great to be here with you all. Excited to be on today.
So this is a conversation that's not totally new to the Mankind Podcast. We're going to be talking about pornography and pornography addiction and addictive behaviors. And Chandler reached out because he is the founder of an app. He created an app called Relay, which is a digital recovery app that's helping men break free from pornography and build lives of integrity, purpose, and connection. That kind of sounds up our alley here in the Mankind Project.
Oh.
After years of his own struggle, Chandler recognized that the transformative power of community in healing and sought to create a space where others could find vulnerability, structure, and hope. He lives in Salt Lake City, Utah, with his wife and his toddler, his 1-year-old son. And I can also say that he just moved last night into a new place. Chandler, thank you for showing up, and thank you for bringing Relay to us to talk about.
No, I'm super excited to be here. I woke up this morning, honestly, so sore and tired from the move yesterday. But the one thing that was actually scheduled on my calendar was this conversation. And yeah, I'm excited to jump into it.
That's wild. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So let's start at the top. What's the problem? What is the problem that you set out to address with Relay, but also really kind of what's the big picture problem with pornography in our culture right now?
Yeah. So, I mean, I grew up in a home where it actually was talked about. I grew up in a Christian family. And so what I was taught, was kind of, hey, morally, pornography is something that you should watch out for, and that was the message that I got growing up. I grew up when, as I was starting to become a teenager, Instagram and social media were just barely kind of on the rise. And so, I didn't necessarily go looking for anything. It wasn't magazines for me. It wasn't any sort of introduction by a cousin at a sleepover or something. It was, gradually just exposed to sexualized content that was coming out on Instagram. And over time, right, that natural curiosity at that stage of life was there. And I think that was, normal, but at the same time, I wasn't quite sure how to handle those feelings. And so over the years to come, it was almost like one day I woke up, and it's hard for me, Boysen, to pinpoint a specific moment where I realized that this is creating some sort of negative impact on my life. But all of a sudden, it was just like a really clear feeling of my life feels powerless. I have no ability to really manage this. It is completely taken over my agency, my ability to really choose. And I think the ripple effect, and I think the deepest issue with this problem as a whole for society is the way that it impacts the individual because of the shame and the secrecy with which it is happening, right? It's usually behind closed doors where no one knows about it. And it's really the antithesis of real connection, right? It's not with another real human being, it's through a screen. We can get into that more, but that's what I noticed when I was
And
exposed.
what are some of the kind of broader impacts? Because I'm sure in your work in developing the app and kind of pitching to get this kind of accepted, like what are some of the stats about what the porn industry looks like, what secretive use, what addiction, what are some of the facts and figures about that?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I'll reference. We're friends with Fight the New Drug, and they exist as a nonprofit solely doing research around the statistics and the numbers. So that their website has a lot of the latest information on that. You know, the number that I remember hearing kind of growing up was like 9 in 10 males, right, will be exposed and to some degree develop a habit with pornography growing up. And so in the years that I've built Relay and in my own recovery journey, which is, over the last 10 years, I have probably talked to like one-on-one over 1,000 people at this point who have dealt with some degree of struggle with pornography. And I think other people too that I've just met casually, that number generally holds true. I think for men, not everyone, it doesn't mean 9 in 10 have some addiction that's debilitating their entire life.
Right.
But I do think that what I'm noticing more lately in our numbers at Relay is that a vast majority of people in relationships are experiencing some degree of sexual brokenness. So I'm not going to just, call that pornography, but any degree of whatever we as a couple mutually, so for example, me and my wife, whatever she feels like is breaching our trust or our integrity in our relationship, that's some degree of brokenness. So that can be pornography for some couples. Maybe that's masturbation. Yeah. It could also be beyond pornography to some other forms of infidelity. And that I've wanted to actually maybe conduct a research study with our population at Relay, because what I'm seeing anecdotally is maybe 1 in 3 couples, maybe as much as 1 in 2 couples have some degree of that sexual brokenness that is impacting the trust in the relationship. And it's really sad. Obviously, it's not just people in relationships, but
I really like the way that you're speaking about it in terms that are broader than just pornography. So I'm hearing recovery. I'm hearing life has become unmanageable. I'm hearing this behavior, this thing, this use, this substance is interrupting trust and relationship in such a way that it's impacting your ability to be present, right? You're impacting your ability to be in it fully. So
totally.
you and I touched base in our first conversation about the kind of addictive process, right? And I hear arguments out there online sometimes about, well, porn use isn't an addiction, it's not an addictive thing. Talk about this as an addictive process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember. I was early on building Relay. I was realizing that there's a group of people in the clinical community that don't fully agree that pornography and sexual addiction is a real thing. And then there's a group that really does advocate that it is a real addiction, a real thing. As somebody who struggled with this, right, for me it felt really invalidating to feel like you're telling me that the 1,001 times that I've tried to quit and could not, like it like completely felt like I had no power over that, is not an addiction. Okay, so I think stepping back, I personally don't think the label really matters. Am I actually addicted or not?
Cool.
I don't think that matters. I think the question that we should be asking, and this is not just a pornography thing, this is maybe a broader question for all men that want to be healthy. Are there any sort of behaviors or patterns in my life that are not aligned with my values or not leading me to a deeper sense of purpose connection, and integrity. And I think when I looked at my life that way, I felt like, yeah, I think that, there was a lot of shame that was maybe self-imposed. And I think that's the saddest thing, is when this issue creates so much shame that creates its own problems. But I think for so many men in particular, and it's not just a men's issue, is what we're seeing, that the
Right.
number of women struggling with compulsive sexual behavior and feeling trapped is like also on the rise. But I think the common theme is people just feeling like trapped. And with this addiction, that makes it so different than others, is the average age of exposure, and when it develops, is a lot younger, and it happens all alone. So, while my brain is still forming at 10 years old, the brain doesn't stop developing till 25, most research says. Um, our brains are exposed to this hyper stimuli, which is pornography or sexualized content, right? As our bodies are changing, that's like where the brain wires those associations. We could go into this, but in that critical age of teenage years, I'm seeking for belonging as a human being. This isn't an addiction thing. This is every human being. I
Yes.
want to feel loved. I want to feel seen. I need to feel safe,
Yes.
especially by my caregivers, my parents, my family, but also in peer groups, and then later on in romantic relationships. But no family dynamic, no community, no group of people is perfect. And so almost all of us experience some degree of that brokenness, where we were missed, where we didn't fully get our needs met by the people that we really were counting on. And for so many that get trapped in this addiction in particular, the timing coincided where, I found porn and it made me feel better. It was that comfort, that relief, when I didn't feel like anyone quite understood, or when there was, the divorce happening at home, or when, I felt that pressure for me to always be an achiever, and to feel like that stress or that pressure, to be enough, maybe for my circles or my parents, was tough to meet. So there's a lot of complex dynamics that feed into this. It's not just, I like porn, I look at it, and then, wow, I'm trapped. It's usually a lot deeper than that.
Yes. This is a cross-generational conversation that we are having as well. So I'm 54. You're definitely not that. My early exposure to pornography was in that Gen X kind of way, right? It was the box of magazines and Betamax. Betamax. Do you even know what Betamax is? Right? Betamax tapes, which is pre VHS,
Yeah.
in my stepfather's closet. Like that was like my early exposure. And the world has changed, and that was rough, like, and that was hard. And pornography is something that I have struggled with off and on through relationships, through the secrecy, through the addictive compulsive behaviors, through all of this stuff through my life. And I can't even imagine what it would be like to be 10 years old today, or to be 11 years old today.
Oh yeah. With AI, with social media, just all content being hypersexualized now in society. I think for many of the men that come into Relay, they are, 40, 50, 60 years old, and the problem has been around for decades in their life. And, they're desperately looking for a way to cut out all the triggers, right? It's like everywhere I look, it feels like I can't, it's like I want to make it easier on myself, but it feels impossible in this world today. Um, and I think the truth is that we can't actually prevent every possible,
Right.
exposure to this. So the conversation began, is what can we do?
Let's talk about secrecy, because I think that that's something that certainly shows up in the Mankind Project when we are helping men kind of get honest about their lives and get vulnerable with for themselves and for a circle of men and in their relationships and their family. Talk about the role of secrecy and what you've seen play out as you've developed Relay and gotten the community building.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what I've observed with secrecy is that secrecy develops when we don't feel like we have the safe outlet to be able to express and communicate the full truth of whatever we are experiencing. So if we don't feel like our parents growing up, you know, uh, created an environment where we could talk about whatever was going on in our lives, then that fuels secrecy, right? so I think from very early on, maybe how we were nurtured, what we were taught with subliminal messaging, even from a very early age. I'm going to say, so for my toddler right now, he's 18 months old. If I send the message that when he does something wrong, like this morning, he was trying to climb up like on these boxes in our new house. And my first reaction was to tell him, to get off the boxes, or like, I don't want him to get hurt is what I'm thinking.
Yeah. Right.
And I'm not trying to make this a discussion about how to parent or, what's the right thing to say in that moment. But if the message that he receives in that instance, in his brain or in his body is like, I'm bad, or dad is upset with me, or I did something wrong. Over time, I think what happens, and I'm reflecting on a lot of the experiences and trying to summarize what I've heard from a lot of men, feeling like I don't know how to verbalize, or I can't verbalize what's going on in my life in honesty to another human being. And I think what happens sometimes is like we end up feeling like friends are easier to talk to than our family, as we're teenagers or young adults. And often, at those stage of life, peers are like helping each other be the most healthy version of themselves, because we're all dealing with our own issues.
Yeah.
And so I think that also breeds, I think, some degree of, um, turning to other outlets, which I'm not trying to suggest that having good friends isn't healthy, but when we only have, the peer outlet of other people who are struggling with the exact same things we are, I think we can only get so far. I think it's important with secrecy that we have a variety of healthy outlets that we can be open and talk, right? So if we can have that kind of communication in our home, if we can also have it in our church communities, if I can also have it in my work circles, if I can have it in groups of other men, like the Mankind Project, where we can come together and be open and vulnerable, I think it's important, because with these types of issues, what we've noticed at Relay, there's a role and a place where talking about this with other men who are going through the same thing is really helpful in a unique way from what I could talk about with my spouse. I need to be honest with her, my wife, but I also need other men, right, that I can talk to and be open with. So when we're missing one of those things, and I think often for men, it's having other men to talk to about this, it's really hard. And I see this a lot when it's like, I don't want to talk to my wife about this because I don't want to hurt her more than I already have. So that's why I love what Mankind Project's doing, because I think it's about helping step into an environment where we can learn and practice to be vulnerable. I think it's a learned skill.
And I admire what you're doing with Relay also, because I've been in some, friend relationships earlier in life where those interactions didn't actually help me deal with
Totally.
the kind of stuff that I was facing. And it just became another place that I shut down from, another place where I was secretive in hiding.
I've heard a lot of guys say, I talked to some of my friends and they're like, what's the problem,
the big
dude?
deal?
This is normal. Yeah.
Yeah. So you kind of mentioned business, and I want to move into there. So it feels a little risky, little edgy, but how do you see this issue with pornography use, obsessive or compulsive sexual behavior stuff playing out with leaders, with people in roles, with business stuff? How does this work?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think a common trend with sexual addiction is that a lot of high performing individuals, very high functioning and on the outside, successful is maybe the word the world would use to describe these people, um, tend to gravitate towards sexual outlets like pornography or other forms of sexual acting out
Yes.
as a way to feel better. And that's my belief on this, Boysen. This is just my hypothesis. I think that as a high achiever, a leader, whatever the context is, maybe you're a pastor at a church, maybe you're a CEO, maybe you are just a person who's trying to be the best you can, whatever your career path and, identity. I think it's isolating sometimes when you're working so hard, and we all, I think, seek some degree of approval. And I think sometimes we talk about approval seeking being negative. I think there's some honest and true needs, again, going back to the little child within all of us, to just feel like we're enough, right? And to be able to have that assurance that we're good enough, that we are good at our core. And I actually really like that idea, because I think for me, as somebody who felt on the outside, so I was the oldest of 5 kids, I felt this pressure to be,
high performing.
high performing. So in athletics, I ran track and cross country, did basketball. I played piano for 8 years. Academics, like I felt like I could and needed to excel in all of them, and I did to some extent. But then the really interesting thing was on the inside, there was this one part of my life that was so out of control, and it was so opposite from what it felt like everything else was in my life. That dissonance, I think, fueled the shame cycle even more aggressively, which made the problem worse. So I think for leaders and those who struggle, a very high percentage of them, maybe relative to the normal population, I think, deal with pornography addiction. And we see a lot of those people that come to our programs. Like, these are C-level executives of big companies. These are people who, in their circles, everyone probably thinks that they've got great lives, that they are put together. But on the inside, what do they feel? They feel like no one maybe fully sees what they're dealing with. And the compensation to try to get those needs met is often, I think, what fuels the problem for leaders.
What's up, everyone? Brandon here. And, I grew up thinking hustle was the only way. I had to push through, grind, burn myself out, rinse and repeat. But now I know better. These days I'm chasing flow, that steady energy, sharp mind, calm focus. That's why I start every morning with Magic Mind. It's not an energy drink. It is a mental performance shot built to keep me level and productive all day. No crash. You can get your hands on Magic Mind when you go to magicmind.com/mankind50 and use code mankind50 for up to 48% off. When you support our sponsors, you support our show, and trust me, you will not regret it when you get your hands on this stuff.
Thank you. That's very powerful. I am reminded, and go jump into another episode of the Mankind Project, which I'm going to be Mankind Podcast, which I'll be releasing probably next week. I had a conversation with Kevin Roberts, who is a literal PhD expert in ADHD. And he wrote a book about Schindler's List, and all of the ADHD characteristics that Arthur Schindler exhibited that helped him actually perform and do the things that he did that were absolutely amazing. And there is folks with ADHD or ADHD tendencies, and there's like 9 different characteristics that check off the box, often have addictive tendencies, all kinds of substances, including sexual addictions, including this kind of stuff, become excellent liars to maintain secrecy, have high risk tolerance, seek out risky behaviors, doing all of this kind of stuff. So there's this kind of like different ones of us out there in the world have different wiring and interact with the world in different ways. Does that resonate for you?
100%. 100%. I think so many individuals dealing with these type of issues are carrying a ton of weight for reals. Like, they aren't just like feeling like their lives are stressful. Like, they really are.
They
like
really carry stuff.
Mountains and a lot. And they usually are. Like, the message that I always try to emphasize when I'm talking to newer guys who are coming into our community is like, man, as you're describing to me your life, you are doing better than you think. Because I know on the inside you feel like you're, barely holding it together most of the time, but you are doing better than you think. And yes, I think it's the self-perception of just how maybe chaotic it can feel, or how numb, I think, is another word that I think tends to happen. It's like, I'm high functioning, but like, I don't know what I'm feeling. So sometimes, like, we say that you don't really have a porn problem, you have a pain problem. And when we say that, sometimes newer guys will say, what do you mean? Like, but when we dig in more, they're like, I guess I'm just numb. I don't know really what I feel. I've become so apathetic because this is just what life is like. It's just hard. And I've kind of disassociated from the stressors, because that's just the only thing I've ever known. And this problem has been around, like the coping mechanism, which I would also say porn isn't the problem, it's the solution to a problem. And it's maybe not the solution that's serving you very well, but it has become a solution over the years where it's to medicate something. And so if we can kind of zoom out a little bit and get curious and try to understand, what am I trying to medicate here? Again, whether it's porn or alcohol or scrolling TikTok, I don't really care. This is not just a porn thing. Like, what am I running from? And if it's not immediately obvious, I think that's because we built up these layers. So going back to Mankind Project, and I think what we have in common here, Boysen, stepping into vulnerability, I think is in connection is the antidote to almost help thaw that numbness and thaw kind of what we've been disconnected from, so that we can get in tune with where is the pain and how do we help heal those wounds underneath to become healthier. And with that, I think the coping behaviors tend to fade away.
Thank you. That is so well said. So let's talk a little bit about Relay and like dive into the app. Like, sure. Why now? What distinguishes Relay from other solutions that are coming out in the marketplace? There's other stuff out there. What's different about Relay?
Yeah. So Relay is an app that matches you with a group of others who are going through the same thing. So it's very group focused, and it makes it maybe lower barrier than some other alternatives. Like the first group I joined was a Zoom led group. It was on Wednesday nights by a therapist. And when I first joined that, I was a little nervous, but I think I had been struggling long enough and had noticed how powerless I felt that I was just like, I'll do whatever. Throw me. And I think I knew deep down the truth that I couldn't do this alone. So I think Relay really is for those who know and accept to some degree that I can't do it alone, and I'm willing to surrender just a little bit and find some way that I can get help from other people. So when I stepped into that group, I realized the power of having other people in the same boat, where you can practice doing this journey, like changing together. It wasn't just about accountability. I think that was something I was confused about. And so this all kind of explains really where I'm coming from with Relay, why I built Relay. I realized that it was less about having accountability to have a group where I can say, hey guys, I messed up, and hold me accountable more next time. Instead, it was more about a place where I could get some reps, almost like going to the gym, like lifting weights. I could get reps practicing what I hadn't been able to practice my whole life. Real vulnerability, learning how to be more in tune and emotionally aware with other men, and to practice certain skills, right? Of like the way out of pornography addiction is actually just learning how to take care of our needs in healthier ways. So figuring out how to take care of my emotional needs, my physical health, how to just have a bit more balance and overall wholeness, but to do it with other people instead of just doing it alone. Because for so many years, especially I would say leaders and men who are, just have a lot of drive to be good in the world. Yeah. I guarantee if you're listening to this podcast, it's because you care about trying to get better. And so you're, to some degree, you are one of those people. If you're listening to this episode right now,
yeah, welcome to it. Yep.
But to surrender and say, I don't have it all figured out. I can't just put my nose to the grindstone a little harder and will myself to progress. Instead, it's an act of coming into a group and working together. So that's what I saw. That's what I experienced, Boysen. And there's a lot of these groups out there, but they're all usually once a week for an hour on Zoom. Mm-hmm. So Relay makes it basically where you can access that through an app 7 days a week. So I have continuous daily structure and support. So we partner with therapists who specialize in compulsive sexual behavior, who have helped, men and women navigate the road to healing over the years. Single people, married people, so when you come into Relay, we ask a few questions, right, about, how long you've been dealing with this. We ask if you want a group that values faith and incorporates God, or if you don't want that, we have groups for kind of both audiences there, and it will help put you then with a small group of 7 or 8 people through the app. I have all these tools, and I have a daily lesson that we've made with these therapists. So there's a whole curriculum that walks through,
wow.
Porn isn't the problem. So what is the problem? So we're really taking a holistic approach with a group to help you walk through and have that support to change.
for that guy out there, as you said, right? Like many of the folks who are going to be listening to the podcast, they are high performers. They may be dealing with this stuff. They are on some path of improvement for themselves. So to the CEO who says, yeah, this isn't a problem, I got this under control, what are the impacts that you want to point to that he may not be looking at?
Well, I think you can't change if there isn't some degree of surrender, I would say. Like, I think this is a countercultural principle that you either can choose to accept or reject, that achieving progress isn't always about your own willpower and your own skill and your own effort and focus. Sometimes it's also about being able to let go and let other people, let the process happen. And that's because what I believe for this type of issue, it's not actually that you need to somehow brute force your way to some new level of skill where you can overcome the strongest urges in any temptation. Instead it's healing, and healing is more of a pass is probably the wrong word, but if you think about a plant growing, it's like you can't force that thing to grow faster. You got to let it happen. You have to let go a little bit, but you still have to give it the right ingredients. So to someone listening to this trying to say, hey, I don't need sunlight to grow, okay, you can think that, and like you might not be ready, if that's how you feel, that's okay. But I think it can be a normal thing, right? When our whole lives we've had to adapt to our environment to be able to succeed. I think for most guys that I see, Boysen, at some point you will hit some degree of rock bottom. And if you do, then I think it helps with that surrender and realizing, like, I guess something has to change. And for me, that's what it was. It was like everything else I put my mind to, and I can like figure out a way to perform and to figure it out. But it's like the harder I tried to do this, the worse it got. And the more severe the problem was becoming. And I think that's counterintuitive. So if somebody is feeling that resistance, feeling that like, I don't need help, I can continue to try to figure this out alone, I think that resistance is normal. It's almost an indication to me of like, you are on the conveyor belt that a lot of other men have been on. And I'm not saying that relay specifically is the only thing that people need to do. It's obviously not a silver bullet, but what I do believe is that connection is huge, and connection requires other people. Having a real sense of community and support system is essential, as sunlight and water is to a plant growing.
Thank you. I want to split our audiences split our avatar a little bit. So you're a heterosexual guy, you're a married man, you have a young son. I'm guessing that a lot of the folks who are coming into the app, that is kind of their story. So do you have a story for what's commonly referred to as the incel community, involuntary celibate community out there? So a young man who's probably been using porn since he had his first smartphone, who is not married, who is not engaged out there. What are some of the impacts to relationships, impacts to like how he's moving through the world, and what's aspirational? What can you offer that's kind of aspirational for somebody who's really struggling and alone?
Yeah, well, we do, and I personally have tons of friends that I've met through our relay community who are in that bucket of like, they're not currently in a relationship, maybe they're younger, maybe they're a little older. Like we see, guys who are in all sorts of situations, but I know from talking to a few of these friends that I'm close with that it feels really isolating, especially, and maybe even an extra layer of impossibleness of, you're telling me I can really overcome these like urges that I'm feeling when I actually don't have what it feels like. I don't have an outlet, right? I don't have a healthy sexual outlet if I don't have a partner, right? And that, like, to just empathize like that is truly difficult. I don't have some sort of crazy advice to that, like, but I think the real need for all of us, and especially if you're single listening to this, you're not in a relationship, your real need isn't sex. Your real need is to feel wanted, to feel loved, to feel seen, to feel connected with. And how can we meet those needs in healthier ways? And how can we meet them with other people still? And that, I think the optimistic side of this, that I've seen is like, I think the recovery for people who are single isn't just about abstaining from compulsive sexual behavior. It's actually, I feel more capable, like my cup is expanding to receive, a connection from other people and to give. And so very practically, I hear a lot of younger guys saying, I feel like I can actually talk to girls and I feel confident. I don't feel like a depressed mess where I hate myself on the inside. If that's how you're feeling, you're absolutely not alone. I think that's the toll it does take, is the level of isolation is very severe, usually has some form of anxiety, depression, right, looped into that.
Yes.
It's really sad. Again, I just want to empathize and help anyone listening to this. Like, I want you to know you're not alone, man. Like, you out there listening to this, if you're in your car, if you're at work, if you're at home listening to this episode, like, you aren't alone. Even if you feel lonely, even if you yearn for and wish for a relationship, or if you lost a relationship because of this, or if you feel like your ability to connect and to even just feel normal is impaired, there's hope. And again, the message I try to send is like, this whole journey, what I view as what we're doing at Relay is not about quitting porn. It's about restoring your ability to feel whole and to be able to experience connection with other people. And that, can be romantic connection, but it can also be so much more.
Thank you. It's actually a journey from self-loathing to self-love.
Yes.
And speaking to those guys out there, right? And me, like, hello, welcome to my 20s, that the self-loathing was so deep that all I could do was it was brute force, the amount of energy it took to get through the day.
Yeah.
And the self-loathing.
Yeah. And that's why, like, it's, video games, Netflix, porn, like all of it, I indulge in to try to escape my reality, which feels so painful, so isolating, so uncomfortable, because that deep loneliness, that ache, right? Wherever it's stemming from, like that truly is tough to hold. And I think I'm going to get a little like therapist-y. I'm not a therapist, but I spend a lot of time with therapists building out Relay.
Yeah.
Like that, like we didn't necessarily, most of us, learn how to build the skills and capacity to hold those uncomfortable emotions growing up.
Yes.
And so as we're getting into adult years, whatever age you are, like, if we can't hold those emotions, we got to do something. Either we run away from them or we escape them with something. And that's not a shameful thing, but it's important to observe that and to recognize it for what it is, and to be curious. Again, what is it? What's underneath the surface here?
Thank you.
Yeah.
There is I also want to say, because it came up in that, there's this kind of reflection of, oh, woe is me in my 20s. And I also just want to own, there's a gender equity piece, there's an equity piece, there's an impact piece of the people that I hurt and the impacts that I had on others around me because of what I felt hopeless about and trapped in. Like, it had it did damage to people out there in the world.
And that's doubly
to women. It's
doubly tough to swallow that pill. I think that's where the shame becomes worse, to feel like, not only do I feel broken, but I like have evidence that I've hurt other people. It's tough. It's tough to own that and to not just spiral in shame.
Thank you. I want to talk about, because it's here under the surface and it's a little close. Let's talk about faith community and how it's played a role. And I'm also going to be very forthright to say that Christianity was in my life at the worst possible time for this stuff. My mother became a born again Christian when I was 11 years old. And so Jesus camp was like 12 and 13 and 14 years old, and Bible. And I'll just say that the kind of Christianity that I experienced when I was that age was not helpful to what I was going through internally. So talk a little bit about, and you brought God into this idea, and I have a lot of familiarity with 12-step, the 12-step world as well, where there's this sense of higher power, where there's a sense of surrender, where there's a sense of whatever it is, there's something bigger than me, and I recognize that I need help. So talk about the role that faith has played for you.
Yeah, I think for me, I felt grateful, I think, for the influence that my upbringing and like the church experiences that I had, and the way that my parents and church community tried to point me towards God. I do feel like my journey, albeit not totally linear with faith, has largely been positive. But as I think back specifically on like how they intersect with this other side of my story, which I don't know, you can just call it the addiction story or the pornography story, like when I viewed it so much as just a moral thing, like I'm unworthy, I'm sinning, right? This is something like something that is like the church says, God says, is not good. I do think it amplified a very subconscious form of shame. I wasn't totally aware of it. Like I wasn't always just walking around thinking I'm a sinner. I didn't feel that way, but I felt this deep incongruence with what I wanted to be. Like my values were like, I do actually agree and want to be more morally clean based on like, my understanding and my faith or my belief and what that meant. But the incongruence, the distance between where I felt like, what was happening behind closed doors, it was a big gap. Right. And so I think, how did I internalize that? Probably didn't help. My achiever personality brain was like, well, okay, I suck. Right. I'm clearly weak. There must be something wrong with me. It seems like other people that I know, who, friends and other people in the church communities that I look up to, they must not struggle with this. I did open up to one of my church leaders first. That was before I joined a group. That was the very first conversation I had. And I remember he wasn't always Christian or like active, in the church community, this leader. And I remember, he was kind of vague, but he was very compassionate in that conversation where I was talking to him. But I remember after that, there wasn't a whole lot of like guidance, or I don't think he really knew what to do with it with me, if that made sense. And I could sense that. I was still young at the time, but I could pick up on, he didn't make me feel bad about myself, and I was grateful for that. I know a lot of people sometimes have had negative experiences where they felt like they received more shame trying to seek help in a church setting. I felt like I got compassion, but I don't think he was honestly equipped to know how to support, how to help, or how to redirect me to better avenues for help. And I think the damage that did was really, I just felt like I was still wandering. Like I took this big act of courage to try to turn towards a church leader I could trust, but it didn't actually lead to much progress or results in changing what I felt like was the problem. So what that reinforced in my mind was, man, I put myself out there and I'm still kind of stuck. So I think it led to more delay in my healing process. And so that's my story, Boysen. I don't know that it's the same for everybody, but I think it can be disappointing when we look to church communities to help solve some of these issues, and if they don't help it solve it, then it can be frustrating. At the same time, I think there's obviously a huge value to be had in finding community with other people who share similar values, that are trying to strive to become better individuals. And I appreciate that about church communities. And yeah, I think there's a room for a lot of growth, certainly.
Thank you. Let's flip to aspirational, and then we'll kind of bring it home in telling folks a little bit more about Relay. So, what's possible? What's possible for folks who are willing to do this work, put in the time, get connected in community, and invest in their vulnerability?
Sorry, I don't have any stories of hope. You must be stuck forever. That's the answer. No, I'm just kidding, boys. I can be sarcastic sometimes, and like the guys that come into our program, I'm like, all right, guys, like, so there's actually no hope here. We're all just going to be stuck together. I think that's honestly, I say it in joke because I know that that's what it feels like. Of like, even when I join something like a new program, a new group, a new community, part of me still is not fully on board with belief that I can actually change, me personally, because it's been so long. I feel like I've tried everything. Man, the great news though is like over the last 5 years, so we've had about 6,000 people come through the Relay community. and be a part of what we're doing. And there's been some really, really cool stories in both buckets. I'm glad that we talked about you called it the incel community, people who are not in relationships, are single, as well as those who maybe have been married for a long time, or they're, engaged and realizing they need to get their crap together, like whatever the situation is. I've seen just like the thing that has impacted me the most is seeing people come in who feel like I have not been able to literally get more than 1 week clean from these behaviors for my entire life, as long as I can remember, since like 8 years old. And the level of lack of hope when they come in compared to, I'm thinking of a few specific people that I've become close to that like 6 months in, that they were coming to our meetings, and then there was a new batch of new guys who were hearing these guys who had been in the program about 6 months sharing, and they're at like 6 months of sobriety. And just like, I remember the new guys commenting saying like, how did you guys get to this point? And I think the perception is like, there must be something special about them, those guys that are further ahead. But from my point, I'm like, I remember their first meeting. I remember when they were the ones who showed up, also just like, I don't really know if I can do this. I've relapsed like, every day or every week for as long as I can remember. And my life is totally in shambles, and my wife's about to leave me or whatever. And I think that the hope cycle is maybe what I'll call it. The hope cycle where one guy sticks with it long enough, who doesn't give up, who chooses to do that difficult work, to like surrender, to go deeper under the surface, to try to figure out what's contributed to this, and starts to see some progress, even if not everything changes, right? And he still feels like he has a long ways to go. Then the next guy who comes along, who's at square one, who feels totally broken, sees the guy who's just a few steps ahead that feel impossible, that they can see him climbing up the mountain, and it gives them just enough hope to keep pressing to that next milestone, to keep moving forward and to believe. So I think that's the truth, is like, if you look up, I'm going to use the mountain, I guess, metaphor, and you look at the peak that's like super, super far away, and you're already tired because you've already been hiking for years in this case, and you feel like, you're scraggly, and you've got no food, and you're weak, and you don't have what it takes to keep going another few steps, let alone make it to that peak way up there. It obviously feels completely impossible. But when you see real people who look like you, whose story sounds like yours, even if the details and the facts are slightly different, and they're like further up the mountain, and like they can say that they felt like you did when you feel weak, like you can't go on, that gives me that belief that I need to just take one more step, and to not focus on that peak that seems so far away, but to just keep going.
So that I can have, and that these guys can have, relationships that are based in connection, sex that's based in connection, right? So that
Connection that's
like
based on real connection. Yeah.
real connection.
Yeah.
That is based in truth, and based in vulnerability, and based in integrity, a sense of integrity.
Yeah. Could I say one more thing on this?
Of course.
So on the front page of the Mankind Project website, at least right now, as of this current recording date, under why we exist, what you guys have here, it says, we believe that emotionally mature, powerful, compassionate, and purpose-driven men will help heal some of our society's deepest wounds. The message of hope that I think, is most inspiring is that it's not just about you and fixing your, brokenness. It's what it's doing for the next generation. I'm thinking of one guy specifically I know in our community who's from Nashville, Tennessee. His first name's Dane, which I can say because he's been on podcasts with me before, actually, to share some of his story. To see him at his age, he has grown kids who are starting to go to college. To see him putting in the work, and to just imagine what that would be like to be those kids that are starting to leave the house, and to see that my dad is putting in all this work to become a healthier man, a more emotionally mature, purpose-driven man. What I sense there is like, it's not just about, him having a 1 year sobriety streak free from porn, which is amazing. But to see that young boy, right, who's about to go off into the world, is already seeing a different message that I can change, that I can become, more able to handle the difficult emotions that are in my life without turning to these destructive behaviors. And just all that to say, just the message of the change, the work that we do, whether you have a position of, like, call it a platform of influence or not, there are people, I think, in each of our lives that will benefit because of any steps we take to become healthier. And that is like healing, obviously, our world and our community, which is what Mankind Project's all about. It's what I believe at Relay.
Thank you. So you have an offer that you wanted to throw out to folks listening to the podcast.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'd be remiss if I didn't share. Like, I said, we've had thousands of guys come through our community. So, like, if anyone is dealing with this, right, if you're listening to this and you still feel like, you need support, you need help, Relay, again, it'll help match you with a group of other people. You can stay anonymous. You can choose, to just use your first name. You don't even have to put a real profile picture. But as you feel more comfortable, there's opportunities for you to step into real connection with other men, and to have that structure. Again, we've partnered with some of the top therapists that specialize in sexual addiction recovery to help men break free. And there are so many stories specifically within Relay that blow my mind every day. And so for anyone that's listening that wants to try it out, we offer a free trial, and we're also offering a 20% off. So you can go to our website. So it's www.joinrelay.app. So it'll walk you through a few questions, and then you can use a discount code. I think we'll probably link it in the show notes, but it should be,
yep.
Yeah, MKP. So Mankind Project MKP 20. That'll get 20% off your program membership. So yeah, if you're looking for like a deeper place where you can have shame-free accountability, a good community, and lots of tools to help you daily to overcome this issue, I think Relay is a great option to check out.
Thank you. Chandler Rogers from the Relay app. Really appreciate the vulnerability that you brought to the conversation today. And yeah, cool. Thank you for the work that you've put in.
Thank you. It's obviously a heavy conversation. I know, like, man, as we're talking about the pain and like the struggle, and just, I hope that, you listening to this can leave with the message of hope and realize, like, we've all got these secret issues. You're doing better than you think. That's the message. We're all doing this together. And it's been so fun to chat about that today.
Thank you. Keep coming back, y'all.
This has been the Mankind Podcast, produced in association with the Mankind Project USA. And of course, I want to thank you, the listener, because through your attention and your support, you make it a heck of a lot easier for us to let men out there in the world know that they are not alone and that there is more than one way to be a man. And if you've been enjoying the music throughout this episode and all of our episodes, check out Jim, Donovan, and the Sun King Warriors. I have links to them in the show notes. Now, the fee for this episode is simple. If you found gold and insights that you believe could benefit your loved ones and those you care about, be sure to share it with them. And of course, remember that life doesn't happen to us, it happens for us, so long as we rip the pen out of fate's hand and become the author of our own story. So, my friend, pick up the pen, and we'll see you next week. Lots of love.
Hey, it's Boysen. On the Mankind Podcast, we've brought some incredible guests on to talk about the importance of doing the work to improve our mental and emotional health. And here's the truth. Multiple times over the last 25 years, I've had the help of one-on-one work with some amazing therapists. For me, for my wife, for both of us as adoptive parents, and for our kids. The Mankind Project and Men's Group, though awesome, are not a substitute for professional mental health support. And so I'm thrilled that the Mankind Podcast now has BetterHelp as a sponsor for the show. BetterHelp works online. It asks you what you're working on and then matches you for live one-on-one sessions with a licensed therapist, someone trained to work with you, listen, and offer helpful insights. I'm using BetterHelp. It's super easy, and I like what I'm getting. If getting one-on-one support in the comfort of your own space feels like a good direction for you, I invite you to check it out. Go to the link in the show notes or betterhelp.com/mankind. And if you sign up, you'll get 10% off your first month of therapy.